So what do you think about conferences?
It's about giving your customer base or prospective customer base access to you.
Oh, a lot of people will go and grab t-shirts to take home to their kids and they don't have any interest in the company at all.
If people can get in easier, then people can like the product more and give us more money.
You never had to do a booth?
I don't think I've ever had a booth.
I think it's always better to leave people
asking for more.
Hi, I'm Paul Bigger, founder of Dark.
I'm Edith Harba, CEO and co-founder at Launch Darkly.
And you're listening to Be Continuous, a podcast about continuous delivery and software development.
You can get in touch with us anytime at our Twitter handle @ContinuousCast.
The show is brought to you by Heavybit. To learn more, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.
So as I was saying, a good lead is like you're starting in the story already. You're not just starting with like a question like, what do you think of conferences?
Or who am I? Why am I here?
Right, exactly. It's like, you don't want it was a dark and stormy night. It was like, someone walks in and, I don't know, does something, someone gets murdered.
Yeah, so what do you think about conferences?
Oh, God, depends on whether I'm going or whether I'm going for work or whether I'm going for like pleasure. Dramatically affects.
You go to conferences for pleasure?
I have done, I would say not recently. But like went to Strange Loop last year. Strange Loop is amazing. And I would say that that's like, it's definitely the best conference I've ever been to.
What did you like about it?
Largely the audience. Like it's an uncommercial conference.
Yep.
And I mean, there's, sponsorships and that sort of thing. But it's just like a lot of people talking largely about like programming languages, distributed systems, that kind of thing.
Stuff you can't stand talking about.
Stuff I can't stand talking about.
You got to sit down, you like it that much.
Right, exactly. I don't know if it was quite a goal, but like our intent was like, talk to a lot of people about Dark, give them a lot of demos. So there was definitely a work component of going, but like between the parties and they have this amazing party in the City Museum, which has like these like 5-story slides in them or 10-story slides or something. It ended up being just like a lot of fun as well. We're actually going to time the launch party for Dark with Strange Loop. We're going to do it in St. Louis this year.
Oh, cool.
And invite all the people who've seen Dark or who just want to see Dark to the launch.
So that's funny. So what do you see as the purpose of a launch party? Because Launch Darkly never did one. But
did you do a Dark launch?
I think the closest we did to a launch party was after we closed our seed round, we had a meetup here at Heavybit.
Right.
And we bought T-shirts.
Nice.
Like up to that point, I had considered T-shirts too extravagant.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things, and this is sort of related to what you're asking about conferences. It's like there's a lot of marketing strategies that done well can work and done poorly can fail dramatically. And I think having an official launch is one of those things that it can just be nothing or you can turn it into something good.
Well, it was the whole Steve Blank thing of don't launch.
Mm-hmm. So I would say ours takes into this Steve Blank thing. It's like, Airbnb launched 3 times. And it's like, first 2 no one was listening, so who cares? Keep launching until it takes off. And their third one was it taking off. So we've done things that are vaguely launch-like. So we had like a recruiting post where we were looking for an EIR to build stuff in Dark. That was nearly a year ago. And so that was an opportunity for people to hear about Dark, almost a content marketing opportunity. And this is sort of the same. There's an audience of people who seem to be extremely interested in either Dark specifically or the same sort of thing. And people are looking for stuff to do. So we're going to have an event and we're going to tie that to, we're going to release a video of Dark to the world at large. But Dark will not actually be open at that point. So it'll still be like a pre-release thing. We'll be switching from a private alpha to private beta.
This is a granularity that I kind of cringe at.
Yeah. I mean, it's really not important. It's like you release version 7 of your software. It's like, why did we do that? Well, that gives us an opportunity to have an announcement. Yeah,
I mean, my theory is that the last really successful launch parties went out after Windows 95.
I remember Windows 95 coming out. I spent so much time reading about Windows 95. When it was being released, they put so much money into that. The whole fucking world was talking about Windows 95.
Yeah, which just now seems so dry.
I mean, yes, but also it was such a huge deal for the world at large.
Yeah, why?
Why everyone in the world used this software.
Yeah, were we just so much younger back then that an OS was a big deal?
Right. I mean, things didn't turn into this continuous delivery release.
Yeah.
Like it's like you have a new version of iOS. It's like
Actually,
people care, but not as much.
I think people care in a negative way.
Oh, just like here's another annoyed piece of That's
Yeah,
true.
it's like when you see the pop up like, do you want to update your computer? You're like, no,
Yeah.
no, I'm fine. Leave
I
me
would
alone.
absolutely like you to not shut down all my windows. If they were really good at keeping everything working the same, like, freeze a snapshot of something, update the kernel, load the snapshot, something like that. Like when my phone updates, it's no big deal. Like everything stays the same. But when my computer updates, it like fucks everything up and I have to like go reset things.
Yeah, one of my worst conference talks ever was I was setting up my laptop and everything worked just fine. Like a projection on the screen, ready to go.
Yeah.
And then one of the AV techs came in and said, do you want a clicker? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I don't need a clicker. And he's like,
no.
let me just put it in. I'm like, do not touch my computer. And he jammed it in and it didn't work. And I'm like, take it out. He's like, no, let me just click this button. And then like rebooted the entire machine. And it took 25 minutes to reboot.
Why did it take 25 minutes to reboot?
Because he had clicked enough to like, he was like, oh, I'll just install this driver.
No. Murder.
And, because he'd stuck in one of those. And it's like, I need this driver. And like this needs to reboot to install the driver.
Fucking Christ.
And like it was 10 minutes into my talk at this point. I'm just like,
this is like a minute before your talk or something?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so he's like rebooted my entire computer and was installing all this stuff. 15 minutes of my talk, I said, I'm just going to start without the slides.
Yeah.
But I was livid. I was like, do not touch my computer.
Yeah. So you're saying you don't like conferences then?
No, I love conferences. Mm-hmm. I think they're a very effective way to have high bandwidth communication.
Do you mean from a people hearing about Launch Darkly sense?
Or even just like, here's an example. Right before this, we had a lunch for some of our customers and some of our prospects.
Mm-hmm. Prospective customers or prospective hires?
Prospective customers.
Yeah.
So we have a panel and then a lunch. Then afterwards, like somebody came up and in 5 minutes, he told me more about what was happening at his team than we learned in 2 years. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, I loved your panel. Let me tell you about this and what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm. And conferences are the same sort of thing?
Yeah, just people have an opportunity to think about something and then talk face to face. It just suddenly feel comfortable in a way that you don't feel comfortable in email.
So it's about giving sort of your customer base or prospective customer base access to you.
At least for us, like in the early days of Launch Darkly, I got invited to speak at a conference in Sydney, and they paid for my travel, so I went.
Nice.
Yeah. And I gave a really neutral talk on just why feature flagging is good. And after it, 2 people came up and said, we actually want a demo. They both became customers and like really valuable customers.
Nice.
All because I was there.
Right. With Circle, we almost never did conferences. And I think one of the reasons for that was that one of our major competitors, Travis CI, they were amazing at conferences. They were just like a lot of open source people. They went to all the conferences. And then when they went to the conferences, they did like workshops afterwards, like set up your open source with Travis. And like we didn't work with open source at the time. We do now. And so it's like, do we want to compete at this where they're already like, we would be going to the same conferences, right?
Yeah.
Or do we want to like focus on our own thing? And in the end, we spent that time focusing on product, which ended up being a differentiator, and more on content in terms of marketing. Definitely one of them wasn't going to be a successful strategy, but I think with Dark, that'll be different. With Dark, a lot of people are going to want to see a demo, want to hear about Dark. Like, I imagine conferences are going to be a much bigger thing for Dark.
Yeah, I think I want to be clear that I don't think conferences are a cure-all for all products. I think they work well when you're evangelizing or doing something new that people want to feel a connection with.
There's also the kind of company that you are. So you're a top-down sell, is that right?
I'd say we're kind of middle and around.
What does that mean?
Like, we really need to convince a team lead or director to use us.
Okay. So at a conference, who is it that hears you, and then who becomes a lead for you?
Usually it's a mix of they've seen our website, and I'll find this out now. They've seen a lot of our content online, and they're coming to a talk to learn more.
Okay.
Or like they've seen some stuff.
And they are an engineer, a team lead?
Engineer, team lead.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, my manager sent me to your booth to check this out.
Gotcha. Yeah, Circle was a very bottom up. It was an engineer set it up for their team. And we're doing a lot more top down these days. Like people can actually reach out and talk to a salesperson and have someone help them purchase if they're a large company, that kind of thing. But at the time, it was, everyone got started on like the $50 plan or even the $20 plan. And then they grew from there.
Yeah, that was our original thesis. I mean, we had a $49 plan, but nobody signed up for it. Mm-hmm. Everybody needed to get buy-in at least to the team lead level, so they just auto-selected to higher levels.
Mm-hmm. Do you have freemium?
We never had freemium deliberately.
Interesting.
I had been at TripIt, which was a freemium product, and it's a marketing channel. Mm-hmm. Like you basically,
yeah, of course it is. Yeah,
and I think some people don't really understand that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if it doesn't bring you in money, then it's got to do something.
Oh, I got into this heated discussion with another CEO who's like, well, it just gets you a lot of eyeballs and the VCs give you more money. And I'm like, well, until they don't.
Mm-hmm. That's not how I view the world.
Yeah, like TripIt, we converted good in our class, so around 2 to 3% of users converted to paid. Mm-hmm. But if you do the back of envelope math of how many people you have to get on your free tier, and what you have to charge.
It's interesting how kind of different it is for different industries. Like SaaS, like 9% is unheard of.
Yeah.
3% is pretty good. But then you get things like GitHub, for example. Every software engineer has a GitHub account. And who knows what percentage that actually turns to. Maybe it's only like a 3%. They've just seen so much GitHub that at this time, 3% is a lot. But there are companies where everyone in an industry use them.
Yeah. So for conferences, I think it's like freemium. I think it is a strategy, but I don't think it works for everybody. Like I've seen people, it's so easy to spend millions of dollars of conferences.
Yeah.
If you have a misaligned sales and marketing team who is aligned just to like, hey, we're incented by how many Beanie Babies we give away.
Mm-hmm. So you mean that you need to incentivize people by sales qualified leads?
Yeah. I mean, for every conference we go to, we look at the complete cost of the conference, including travel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like we cost in, when we're thinking about going to a conference.
So how much does a normal conference cost you?
It depends. Like let's say a regional conference in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Let's say a sponsorship is
20K?
15, 20K. Yep. And then we also cost in travel.
Of course, yeah.
So
from here it's $500 a person. How many people go?
Let's say 4 people go. Round trip flight is $400. Mm-hmm.
Hotels
in Seattle's expensive in the summer.
Yeah.
So $300 for 2 nights.
Yeah.
So it adds up quickly.
And what about things like prep time? Do you manage to factor all that into the total cost of ownership?
When we look at a conference, what we look at is we just look at, do we manage with the pipeline out of it?
Yeah.
And then closed.
Okay. And so it sounds like you're talking $30K for a conference?
For a smallish one.
Yeah.
Like AWS, much, much more.
Right. Spend $100K for AWS?
Depends how big a booth we get.
Right. How many people would you send?
I think this year we sent 6. Mm-hmm. So in the early days, I was the only booth person.
Yeah.
And I
you had a little tiny booth in the back?
Yeah, no, literally the first time I went to Web Summit, it was just me and I just stood there. Mm-hmm. And our first conference as a company was billed, or 8 people at the time, so we rotated everybody out, including the engineers, because it was a 3-day conference. You can have one person stand there for 8 hours a day, but it is exhausting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you want to have some sort of rotation where somebody can take a break.
I don't think I've ever had a booth.
You never had to do a booth?
Not that I can think of, no.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I did it all in the early days, and I was so happy when I no longer had to go in regular rotation.
Yeah, like if I'm thinking about a booth now, that probably means we'd have to get put together marketing materials, and we never did any of that either.
I mean, you can be pretty basic. Like the first time we did Microsoft Build, we just made a sign and then we had a little leave behinds.
Mm-hmm. Stickers.
I don't think we had stickers back then. It was not super elaborate. And it was funny, one of our engineers wanted to experiment with bookmarks, and so we made bookmarks and nobody took them, but it was a pretty cheap experiment.
Do you feature flag your experiments in real life?
Up until the B round, we were pretty ruthless about, we would only go to conferences we thought we would definitely get leads from. Mm-hmm. We're like, okay, we're not going to go to this one because...
Yeah.
It's funny, we didn't want to go to Java 1 because we were like, we'd been there as engineers. We didn't think that was our market.
Right, okay. You think Java engineers don't use feature flags that much?
We thought that they were on a different release cadence.
That was extremely delicately put.
When we got more money, we had more money when we could experiment more.
Yeah.
Like, so when we raised our C round, which was $44 million, we could be like, okay, let's try to go to more conferences.
Right.
Let's be vigilant about tracking costs.
Do you find that there's a significant difference in the number of leads between whether you're speaking or whether you're just attending?
Absolutely. Like, the best thing is to have somebody speaking, and then the booth can be a driver. Like, so what I do is I give very vendor neutral talks, but I could say, hey, if you're interested in learning about the company, we have a booth.
Yeah. And so that sends people down.
Yeah. If you just have a booth and nobody's speaking, it is harder because you're kind of hoping that somebody is walking around looking for stuff to buy.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you also have to be careful about t-shirts.
What specifically do you have to be careful about?
Oh, and by the way, thank you for wearing your Launch Darkly t-shirts.
I got it at a Launch Darkly conference.
Oh, a lot of people will go and grab t-shirts to take home to their kids, and they don't have any interest in the company at all.
Right. So that's going to conferences, but you hosted your first conference recently. Trajectory?
Has Circle done a conference yet?
I don't think so, no.
Wow, that surprises me.
Yeah.
You have so many customers.
I don't know. And people. We also have a lot of people.
Do you publicly say how many customers you have?
Do you mean only paid customers? Because we have a lot of people who are relying on Circle.
Do you release how many paying customers you have?
We do not.
Okay.
Yeah. My last recollection was for our Series A, we had 1,000 customers.
Wow, paying?
Paying, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We didn't have a freemium tier at the moment, so a lot of them became premium when we launched freemium later.
Oh, that's terrible.
No, I mean, it's not that much money. Like lots of them are on like the $20 plan.
So they just went to freemium?
The switch to freemium ate growth for like 2 months. It was like every dollar that we made was like worked against someone not upgrading or downgrading or something like that.
Wow, that must have been a brutal month for your metrics.
2 months. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And it was like, why aren't we growing? And I was like, we did not put together that it was freemium launched the previous month.
Wow. So
Yeah.
did you auto move people down, or did they self-select?
It was all self-selected. We didn't auto-move anyone down. What we did, though, was we grandfathered people in. So there was a bunch of people who were getting the $100 value for like $20 because they were 2 grandfathers in, and then they refused to move because like the jump was too big.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't perfectly managed, but like, you know, the number of customers that were affected by this is like 10 or 20.
Oh, okay.
And then the number of people who like downgrade, there's only like 1,000 who could potentially downgrade. And most of them were actually, it was probably only half that. So like it wasn't necessarily that big a deal, but it's just like.
Well, I'm doing some quick math. So you're charging $20 a month.
Well, some people were on the 20, some people were on the 50.
Oh, that could be a hit.
Yeah. I mean, like it was at the time where we're doing $1 million a year, probably around then.
What made you decide to do the freemium at the time?
I don't really know. It's just like, it's one of those things I hold to be true that like if people can get in easier, then people can like the product more and give us more money. I guess partially with CI, there's a lot of expansion revenue. Expansion revenue will often be larger than acquisition revenue in a particular month. So, you know, the easier it is for them to get in. And like we had our first plan as like $50, then we dropped the plan to $20 and it's like free. You know, like we're not losing that much revenue.
Yeah, what we discovered at TripBit was the amount of friction between 29 and 49 was the same.
Interesting.
Like people were just as likely to pay us 49 or 29.
Yeah. TripIt didn't have significant competitors, am I right?
Oh, it had many competitors.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we had a ton of competitors at the time.
Gotcha. It feels like there was a whole movement around CI at the same time. And so like I saw a new competitor every month.
Wow.
And there was a bunch of established competitors. We're the biggest now. I'm not sure that we were the biggest for the life of the company. Certainly in the early years, probably us and Travis were roughly the same size. And there was a bunch of competitors that have since died off or got acquired or...
I mean, Travis kind of no more, really.
Oh, it makes me very sad. I don't know any more than people know publicly, but yeah, like it didn't end in the way one would hope.
What made you sad about it?
So Travis sold to, I think Idira is the name of it.
Some private equity.
Yeah, relatively small private equity thing. So like the sale price was like 10, 20-ish million probably. Feels like it was, feels like it was a better company than that. Feels like it was worth more and feels like it had a better future. And I personally have no idea like what went wrong. And then they came in with the, laying people off. And it felt like, and I'm sort of quoting people on Hacker News here rather than giving my own opinion, but it felt like the story became extracting out the revenue streams and lowering costs rather than like actually continuing to reinvest in the space.
Yeah, that's kind of the story of private equity.
Right. And it feels like it is not the time for that to happen to CI. There's so much more to do.
Yeah. The other reason we never did freemium at Launch Darkly is there's a ton of perceived value about having to pay for something. Mm-hmm. Like at the beginning days, Circle was a really early customer of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It wasn't about the money, it was whether you trusted us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, over time, you build up that trust naturally by just having a brand. So people will try you out. Like people will connect their whatever to you without having a conversation in a way that they would never do when you were, when it's just the Edith and John show.
Yeah. It is so much easier these days. In the early days, there were the two huge hurdles. I'm going to tie this back to conferences. Mm-hmm. The two huge hurdles were, do you believe in feature flagging? Mm-hmm. Like at all? And
Sure.
Like, do you believe that this is a valid way to build software? Mm-hmm. And there was a ton of that.
Right. What year were we?
This is in 2014.
2014?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like the this podcast didn't exist. There wasn't a lot of stuff out there about continuous delivery.
Yeah.
That was a joke. There certainly wasn't as much by like an order of magnitude.
Feature flagging, I would still get invited back then to sites, and they would say, convince us about why we should be feature flagging.
Right.
Like, convince us that this
Does that happen anymore? Or are they like significantly larger customers for whom that happens, or more conservative customers?
So there was two hurdles in the early days. Mm-hmm. Do you believe in feature flagging? Mm-hmm. And you believe that our company is a reliable vendor?
Yeah.
And those were both two huge hurdles. Mm-hmm. Like, I would go in, I remember, and pitch these big e-commerce sites about why they should feature flag. Mm-hmm. And then the second step was, well, why us?
Yeah.
Do you trust us?
Yeah. We only had the second one of those. So for Circle, there was like this movement happening around CI, and already a bunch of parts of it had moved to the cloud. So the Heroku, the hosting had become cloudy, and the source control had moved to GitHub, so that had become cloudy. And there was this step in between that was not yet in the cloud. And it feels like around 2012, there just started to be this movement where everyone's like, oh yeah, we need CI and we need it to be in the cloud. And we didn't have to do anything for it. So the only thing we had to trust people is like, why would we give you our source code? And it was at a time where giving people your source code seemed crazy. Seemed just like
crazy
you
talk.
could not do it. And then as the company got bigger, like we had to convince people of that at the start. But, a year or two in, just questions stopped coming up. People had heard of us, and that was enough.
Yeah, the shift happened, I think, over the last 2 years where, like, now it's our dev evangelists are much more on the road than me. Mm-hmm. So they'll ask questions like, are you currently feature flagging?
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
And it used to be like 2 or 3 hands would go up.
Yeah.
And the rest of the people had just come to the talk to learn about this.
Yeah.
And now, like, I gave a talk in Chicago at the CTO Summit, and I said, who here is currently feature flagging? Every hand went up.
Nice.
So it had switched from, should I do this, to how should I do this the right way?
Right. Are you competing against people rolling their own feature flags?
I don't think of that as competition at all. I think of that as an on-ramp.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Have you practiced that well? Is there a lot of like VC pitches where you've got asked that question?
No, I honestly believe it. I mean, we put out a ton of content about how to build your own system, because it's like, if you built your own system, you don't want to do it again.
Right.
Like, I was just at a lunch and learn with the VP of engineering from Rollbar, and he talked about how he'd had to build his own system at Cisco, and he's like, never again. And then the VP of engineering at Drone Deploy, and he had to build his own system at Exact Target, and he's like, never again.
Wow.
If you've built your own, you don't want to build it again.
Right. I imagine that there's a lot of like orchestration things and they're all switching to Kubernetes, obviously. But there was for a time, there's a bunch of things that are like Kubernetes, and like everyone is like, I built one of these, it was fucking horrendous.
Yeah.
Because everyone built one before they existed. Like even if you didn't call it an orchestration system, it was like you wrote a bunch of software that orchestrated a lot of like cloud or containers or VMs or something like that.
Yeah, so a lot of our conference strategy is just telling people there's a better way. And if you want to build it yourself, here's how to do it. And have fun.
Yeah. At the start of Dark, we were keeping quite quiet about what we were doing.
You're
keeping it dark. Thank you. I got there first. But now we're just like writing it up.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of blog posts. We wrote one. It's called "What Is Dark." It's on our blog, and it just like lays out the way that we think about the world. And I had previously been very nervous about like other people, getting this idea and running with it. And now it's just like, nah, it's a challenge to even convince people that this is a good idea or that it's even possible. So like, just tell everyone.
Yeah, like that's always been my theory. Like we shout and hope somebody listens.
Right. Does that lead to competitors at all?
Oh, of course. But, competition is good. It makes you focus on what you think you're good at. Mm-hmm. Like, we have such massive scale now.
Yeah.
We helped Intuit at Tax Day.
Wow.
I am very proud of our customers and what they're accomplishing. Mm-hmm. I think we went heavy on conferences, but we were always very careful about not just throwing money in the wind, but trying to account for where it was generating results. Mm-hmm. And then we did our first conference, and that was so much fun.
How was Trajectory?
It was a blast.
Nice.
What I hadn't realized is that full customers came, people who were interested in us came. I hadn't realized that people who were thinking about joining us came.
Oh, that's obvious now that you say it out loud.
Yeah, like we had an offer out to a salesperson, and he came to the conference because he wanted to get a feel for how excited the customers were. Uh-huh. And he went home that night and he signed the contract.
Nice.
But we had people who were thinking about joining us who wanted to get a feel for... The exact quote from the salesperson was, do people actually care about this, or are they just here because their boss sent them?
Right. I went to the Honeycomb user conference.
I was there too.
Right. And I'd never seen this before, but they barely had a schedule at all.
It was an unconference.
Right. And that was, like, they had, 2 talks or something, and then everything else was like these, write your name on the thing, there's a facilitator, there's 12 people sitting around talking about a thing. It was really good.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the interesting feedback we got on our conference was we were trying to make it, again, very vendor neutral. Mm-hmm. So it was all about talks from our customers and then even talks from non-customers. Mm-hmm. Like one of the most popular talks was Josh Wills, who's at Slack. Mm-hmm. And he talked about the feature flagging system he'd built at Google and the challenges there.
Right.
So not a customer at all, just somebody who's in the field. The feedback we got was that people wanted a little bit more from Launch Darkly.
Interesting.
Because we'd held.
Isn't that the feedback that you got before when people wanted demos and you had kept it vendor neutral?
I think it's always better to leave people
asking for more.
Yeah, I think we went a little too slim because I gave a 5-minute opener, and John Kodomo, my co-founder, gave a 5-minute closer. And people were like, well, we actually wanted a roadmap.
Right. Was it multi-track?
We did 2 tracks.
Right, so you could have had a Launch Darkly specific, feature set, roadmap, a fireside chat with the VP product. Yeah,
it's funny because I think it was a reaction to people who'd been at companies where their conferences were very vendor specific.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we'd gone way over to the other side where people were asking for more.
I've definitely been at conferences where they sell a vendor slot and then you have the worst talk ever because it's sold. They didn't have to qualify.
We usually don't buy slots, but we do buy slots at QCon.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know QCon sold slots.
They do, but you're on a specific vendor track, and they label it as vendor track.
Yeah.
It's very clear. This is the vendor track.
Yeah.
But I was very happy because this year they keep track of how many people are
attending each one,
pre-registering. So they moved me to the second biggest room.
Oh, nice.
Because even though it was a vendor talk. People wanted to see Launch Darkly and what we were up to.
That's cool.
Yeah. Oh. A final thing we should talk about is what conferences do you like to attend besides the one in St. Louis?
So I kind of like language-specific ones or stack-specific. So if there's something where, so let's say Clojure Conj was one I went to before. Not only do you get to talk to people who have a broad set of the same problems as you get to see a lot of what's happening in the space and sort of what's sort of the advanced front. Apart from that, I don't really go to much else. I'm not a significant conference goer, but the best conference I ever went to was the History of Programming Languages conference.
I'll just like to say the best for you.
The best for me. It was wonderful, but it was in 2007. They hold it every 15 years because there's just not that much history. But it happened while I was doing my PhD, and I convinced my advisor to let me go. And it was next to all the other programming language conferences like PLDI, and yeah, it was really great. And all the people who wrote programming languages were there.
Are you going to go in 2022?
I hope to go in 2022.
15 years later.
Right. Can speak in 2037, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Do you go to CTO conferences?
Oh, I did go to CTO Summit. That was really good.
Yeah. Somehow I got sucked into CTO Summit.
I mean, a lot of the conferences I go to are just like kind of, you go to hang out with your friends.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I think of Heavybit events.
Right.
And I really enjoy them because I get to see people who are also care a lot about developer tools.
Right. But like CTO Summit, like I know 15, 20 people who go to it. And
yeah, something I try to be very careful of, and I love CTO Summit because I think it's the perfect size of around 150. Mm-hmm. So you still feel comfortable walking up to somebody and saying, what do you think of that talk?
Right.
Like at AWS, I would not just walk up to some stranger and say,
Oh, yeah. For our dark, the launch party, we had like a planning session for today, and we're talking about like icebreakers and that kind of thing, and like make it easier for all the introverts to actually like enjoy themselves.
yeah, I think up to about 100, you can still feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, it starts to break into cliques.
Right. And it's so big that you can't just pick a random stranger to talk to.
Yeah, or just feel comfortable that they're not going to be like, this is weird.
What is your favorite conference to go to?
Oh, gosh. I love the Heavybit events.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they're wonderful.
I like the Dev Guild stuff because people come up from LA or in from out of town.
Yeah.
I love the CTO Summit events. Mm-hmm. I am very fond of GlueCon, and I couldn't go this year.
Yeah, GlueCon is cool.
Yeah.
You should go to Strange Loop. Come to our party.
Do I get a t-shirt?
Thanks for listening to this episode of To Be Continuous, brought to you by Heavybit and hosted by me, Paul Bigger of Dark, and Edith Harbaugh of Launch Darkly.
To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com. While you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.